Okay, I'm going to call to order the Tuesday, July 7th regular city council meeting. And I'm going to ask Colleen to call the roll so I know who's there.
Okay, Mayor Steidel,
Here.
Council President Benefield,
Here.
Councilor McCarthy. Here. Councilor Ogilvie,
Present.
Councilor Risley. Here. Thank you. All present.
Thank you. First thing then is approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second it.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay. That takes us into our public comment phase. For those who are online, obviously, comments have to have been requested before this meeting started. And any comments you wish to make about this meeting, you can send in after the meeting. We do have some folks who would like to speak, and I'm going to ask Colleen to just go down the two that we have inquired, and there's, I believe, somebody else in the audience.
Sam,
Hello?
the approval of the minutes, because I have one correction.
The consent agenda.
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Is it dramatic enough that we need to?
What it has to do with it's on page 6 of 7, and it is,
Of which meeting?
yeah, I'm trying to, do that. The June 9th meeting. And, on good of the order, we're talking about, council agreed that 10 by 10 canopies can be used during the temporary allowance in outdoor restaurant seating. Well, I Googled canopies, and it says a canopy can also be a tent, generally without a floor. So I would like to make sure that it says a canopy that's open on all sides.
Tell me what was discussed. It
Talks about, restaurants.
No, I just mean that what's in the minutes is what was discussed. So if we use the term canopy, I think we need to say it, we need to continue to say that.
So, I would like it to say canopy, with open sides.
Yeah, and actually, I did recall that conversation because
We
we
did
started
talk
talking
about
about 10, we said, no, there will be no sides. So
Right.
that's consistent.
Right,
Got it.
thank you.
Sure. Good catch.
Okay, are we good?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I believe I don't know the two. I know Nadia wanted to speak and somebody else. So let's start with Nadia. Okay, thank you. I see you. Nadia, why don't we start with you?
All right. Thanks, everyone. My name is Nadia Gardner. My address is P.O. Box 650, Tolovana 97145. So I know everybody on City Council, and I've known y'all for a long time now. And I'm just going to guess that if I asked you right now if you were not racist, you would say that you're not racist, or at least you try not to be. But recent events across our nation have reminded us that to claim oneself as just being not racist is not enough. It hasn't been enough to stop the incarceration of killing of too many Black men and boys. The police, you probably have heard by now, the police kill 1,000 people a year. And Black people are 3 times more likely to be. Now Charles is texting me, which makes me think, can you hear me? Okay. um, Charles wants to talk, so maybe he can chat to the staff. The police kill 1,000 people a year, and Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed in those killings than white people. And it hasn't been enough to be just not racist to combat the systematic racism that pervades really our entire way of life, that holds down our Black, Indigenous, and people of color throughout the country, and including in Cannon Beach. So today I want to ask you individually, but also as a city, to take the stand that you are anti-racist and that you do the work necessary to fight racism in all its forms. Now, there's a lot to do. It's kind of overwhelming how many different things that we individually and as a group can take on. So I just wrote down a few, and I've been speaking to some of the city council members about others, but I just wanted to focus on a few. So right off the bat, a really easy thing that you could do is to start with a proclamation that Black lives really do matter to you and to your city. And you can also take, Obama has, and my Brothers Keepers Alliance, you can take a pledge to review your police use of force policies and reform them to ensure that you won't have issues in the future with being behind on some of those best practices. After that, I'd really like you to get together in a work session to make anti-racism a priority within your city workings. I'd love to see you do a diversity, equity, and inclusion audit and plan. And I want to see it actually implemented. I feel like we do a lot of plans and they just end up on bookshelves, but it's really important that this plan be part of your day-to-day workings, both from on a staff level as well as a leadership level. Cannon Beach, as you all know, is more diverse than it first appears because it's very segregated, right? I think 20+% of your town, your residents are in the Latinx community, many of them Spanish speaking, but a lot of them have been there for longer than I've lived in the area, 20, 30 years, even longer. But if you look at your city hall, your police, your volunteer committees and councils, you are all white and you are not Latinx, and that's a problem. So I understand that your police have made some efforts to diversify the force, and I really appreciate that, but it hasn't, as far as I know, you haven't made any progress. And so I think it's really important that that becomes a priority, that you ask the city manager and the police chief to look at what other small towns and larger towns are doing. And I did some just Google searching on what towns are doing. There's some amazing innovative programs that different cities, small and large, have put together. Work with the Lower Columbia Hispanic Council, with local churches, with Spanish language services, with Classic Community College to train and hire people of color and Latinx people. And lastly, if you could do me the favor of making this a topic on your agenda, as it's surprising to me that so far this has all been happening, and I understand there's a lot of things on your plate, but it's not an agenda item to even discuss in your city councils or work sessions. So you as a group, if you could, get this as a regular thing on your agendas. What's your progress? What's working? What's not? If you're not making progress, what are you going to do different? And if you don't have this regularly on your agendas, it's going to drop down on your priority list because you have all the squeaky wheels screaming about this and that, parking and all that, and dune grading and other things. So it needs to be on you to make it a regular part of your discussion so that you can really make progress on this super important issue. It's been way too long. And passivity is no longer an option. So I thank you for your time, and I know you guys are going to do the right thing. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nadia.
Thanks, Nadia.
Lynette, is that correct? You requested to speak?
Yep, that's correct. Thank you. Good evening. First, I would like to express my support of Nadia's statement and on the actions the city should take toward making a statement on the Black Lives Matter movement and anti-racism, police reform, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Nadia suggested that I come here to sort of be in support of this, but I also wanted to make a statement. And my hope is that the city moves forward with action items that she listed, but I'm also here to ask the city to take action too. In 2017, the City Council passed a resolution number 1708, declaring Cannon Beach a city of inclusivity. This was in response to federal government's crackdown on deportation, targeting of immigrant and refugee communities. The Inclusivity Resolution acknowledges the important contributions of these groups and states that inclusion is a vital concern for the welfare of Cannon Beach. I would like to remind the council of the passing of this resolution and ask that they take this resolution further by committing to the following: a creation of a plan for mandatory and ongoing diversity, equity, and inclusion training for the council members and all Cannon Beach police and city staff, a citywide equity audit to be used for the creation of equitable and inclusive policies, practices, planning efforts, and communication, and to update items identified through the audit as not equitable or inclusive. A commitment and plan to intentionally diversify the city's council, staff, and police department so that at the bare minimum, it's a makeup that is reflective of the community's racial and ethnic demographics. Requirement of Spanish courses, for non-Spanish speaking Cannon Beach police staff, and in future hiring of Cannon Beach police staff, making Spanish a requirement for hire. As one of the city staff pointed out when I requested to read my public comment, the council doesn't normally hear written public comment that is already submitted, nor do you take action or comment during the meeting. I'm not asking you to take action at this meeting, but I am proposing you take action soon. A commitment to work around diversity, equity, and inclusion is a long-term commitment that should be taken seriously. And I asked to read this during the council meeting so that you would see and hear me. As a person of color, I want to see diversity in the city's leadership. I want to see representation of brown, Black, Indigenous, people of color. And for those who are at this meeting, I want you to question why our city leadership doesn't reflect the makeup of our community. I would be happy and willing to speak with counselors regarding steps our city can take to be more inclusive, equitable, and diverse. And I don't have the answers, all the answers, but I am committed to this important community building work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. Colleen, there was somebody in the audience that you said wished to speak.
Yes, Wade Corkendall is here and he has something to say at public comment.
Members of the council, thank you for allowing me the chance to speak this evening. I have a few comments that I'll start with some of the positive things. First of all, it was very great in early March and April. It was kind of like returning to the years of yesteryear when we had a few vehicles on the street. You could find a parking anywhere you wanted. And even we had good weather at that particular time. And so that's the good part of this. There are some issues, though, that I feel really need to be dealt with more in a more direct way by the city council, the chief and the police department. But before I get to that, I've forgotten one other thing. I do want to thank the Public Works Department for all their great work in the repaving of West Jackson Street. It's really appreciated by the people who live in West Jackson. Very nice job. The only problem is it's risen the speed limit by the tourists that seem to think it's a NASCAR paved way. And they tend to go a little bit faster than even they used to, but it's a very smooth area. And the kids this last weekend sure loved to race up and down on their bicycles on it, when they could. On the other side, I have to say that never before have I seen so many people ignore the orders of the council. The council passed an ordinance and said, please stay out of Cannon Beach, tourists, because of the virus. And as we found out as time went on in May, early June, mostly day trippers arrived, and they did not seem to give a darn. They didn't care. You could say anything you wanted to them. They were here to do their thing and then leave. They weren't here for restaurants because they knew there weren't any open. They weren't here for bars because they knew there weren't any open. But they managed to go on the beach. They managed to congregate. They managed to leave their garbage along where the car was parked on the street. They even including the dog droppings that they may have picked up and then squished with their tires. So one of the problems that I see with this is going to continue on, and it needs, if we're going to have ordinances that mean something, we've got to do something to make them be of value to the city and be of value to the residents. You can't just tap people on the hand and say, no, 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 you shouldn't do that. We can order people off the beach and show a statistic of how many we've ordered off the beach, but when they don't go, if you're going to close the beach and close the town, you have to mean it. And the only thing that people understand is they're going to come to Cannon Beach as long as Cannon Beach is here, as long as the TV stations in Portland show what a beautiful day it is with Haystack Rock gleaming and the sun shining. They come down here in the droves. They don't care. They're here to do their thing. So if we're going to close something, then you're going to have to put something that they get citations or whatever you set, and with some penalties, not a tap on the wrist, not a $25 fine, which gets ignored. They need to be shown that when things are said down here, they're meant, because there are a lot of residents down here that need to be protected. Moving on. I want to talk for a minute about the 4th of July parade. And this time, when we have had all the riots and the anarchy and the destruction on our major cities, it creates, why are we here in this country? And then we're here in this country because of our forefathers, and then backed up by the servicemen and women who gave their lives to make our country a great country and a bastion for liberty. It was very disappointing to see that something couldn't have been worked out in some manner, on some basis of spacing, to continue to have the 4th of July parade. I understand that from my kids that were here with our grandchildren, that there were some minor parades down on Hemlock roughly around the time that some families that got together and marched up and down Hemlock. But not to have the entire parade, I would certainly urge the city, the council, and the volunteers that work with this to work on some basis that make sure we have a parade again next year. It's important. It's important to the city. It's important to the people who live here. It's important to the people who have houses here. They come here to participate. The last item is the war that went on July 4th in the evening. I thank the chief because I just got a copy of his deal for 41 fireworks calls and 1 citation. The law is a law. If you are going to say illegal fireworks are illegal, you have to mean that illegal fireworks are illegal. It used to be back when, and I'm talking about the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, fireworks were all over the beach. Nobody really, yes, the police occasionally went down with their 4-wheelers and tried to monitor it, but it's awfully hard to run from one end of the beach to the other because skyrockets go off. Well, there were a lot of people on the beach. There were a lot more people up in our area on the presidential streets shooting off everything. I'm talking about aerial bombs. I'm talking about skyrockets. I'm talking about other things that go boom and spread sparks all over the place. Some of these homes still have shingles on them. Now, fortunately, it's been raining, seems like forever since May started. But, so I guess there were no other results from the sparks coming down. There was a RV, big RV over on Van Buren and west of Hemlock. Seemed to have a whole lot of people in it. All of them were out in the street. They were shooting fireworks off. I guess some were legal, most of them were illegal. I'm one of the 41 people, or maybe the 41 includes responses, I'm not sure, but anyway, I'm one that called in because the boom booms, and I mean, these were aerial bombs going off, and it wasn't just one, there was a lot of them. And then there was the big skyrockets down on Van Buren further that were going on. Folks, if we're going to have laws, let's have laws that have some teeth to them. And Chief, I'm going to urge you to work with somebody to make some, if you give out a ticket and say, bad boy, you got to have some penalty behind it. Because these people that come down, and I don't think there were very many residents shooting these things off, but these people come down, they're not going to get caught, they're not going to be censured, they're not going to be fined, they're not going to be done anything with it, because they can get away with it. And it's just compounding itself. This was the worst 4th of July that we've had in quite a while. It was all over the place. And it's just going to continue. Next year will be 4th of July again. And if nothing more is done, it's just going to keep on expanding. So folks, if you're going to forbid something, forbid it and back it up, please. If you're not going to back it up, you might as well forget about everything and just shrug your shoulders, because that's what's happening. So I thank you for your time tonight, and I hope you give this some consideration in the days and weeks and maybe even months to come. That's how we're going to look at the 4th of July a year from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wade. Now, I understand that Charles wants to speak. Don't hear you yet, Charles.
His audio isn't connected, Tammy. He hasn't hooked up his audio. He's holding something up, but I can't see what it says.
Can't see it. Unmute. Can you press the unmute?
No, his audio hasn't been established, so I can't do anything from my end.
So, can he hear us asking him to unmute?
Yeah, he's shaking his head, so it sounds like it.
You could try calling in on the call number.
Mm-hmm.
You have to click on the, with the audio.
Yeah, he has to join the audio on his end.
We can't read that.
Phone number?
Looks like a phone
Phone
number.
number, but I can't, oh,
540.
540-309, but I don't know what the other numbers are.
646.
Yep, right there at the bottom.
I tell you what, we'll move on, but we'll come back to Charles when he gets his audio set up. Or we can get a phone system connected.
Can you talk to her? Thank you. Someone finally unmuted me. Thank you.
Oh,
Can
there
you
we
hear
go.
me now? No?
There we go.
Okay. I almost threw a joke in there and said, well, this is pretty normal, actually. I'm the only black guy in the room and I can't talk. But I'll refrain from that. Anyway, I want to thank the distinguished members of the Cannon Beach City Council for allowing me to speak this evening. My wife and I moved to Cannon Beach 2 years ago. We love it here very much, and we feel very much at home. My personal history is one of being born in the Jim Crow South in the 50s and having experienced horrible bodily harm to family members of my own, in particular one uncle who was beaten left for dead, and his crime was he was looking at a white woman. When that happened when I was very young, and it's seared in my memory, and by the grace of God, I guess he survived. I can't count the number of times I've been pulled over by law enforcement for driving while black. Shockingly, it's happened in Clatsop County since we moved here. I know that seems like it doesn't happen here, but it actually has happened here. I left my native home of Texas and moved to the West Coast to work and live in the 80s, and then moved back to Virginia, which, as everyone knows, is the capital of the Old South, and lived there about 25 years. Things had gotten better, but they still weren't as good as they should have been, but they were acceptable. I've had a lifetime of experiencing systemic racism, overt and otherwise, and even being called the N-word by members of law enforcement to my face. That has not happened here, but it did happen a lot in the so-called New South. I believe racism is built into the fabric of America, and simply saying it isn't is running away from the truth. Before I moved here, I was asked if there were any black people who lived in Cannon Beach. And my answer to them was, I don't know, but there soon will be one. And so I moved here, and I love Cannon Beach. We love Cannon Beach a lot. But I would like to say to the council that we all must be vigilant in day-to-day subtleties of racism. The staring is something all black people learn to live with. It's almost like we just kind of showed up, like we beamed from heaven by Mr. Scotty on Star Trek or something. But for those who don't know, black people have been in America since 1619, longer than most of your ancestors, I would say. We were here at the earliest of the English settlers, and that's since 1619, recently a 400-year anniversary of Africans in Virginia. The other thing is women clutching their purses when black men approach them on sidewalks. I mean, I've never stolen anything in my life, and most black people I know never stole anything in their life. But these are sort of things that people assume that a black person, there must be something he's up to, or he's going to do something illegal. That, again, is part of that racism fabric of the United States of America. The other thing is letting the crazy uncle who just kind of says ugly things around his all-white family and let it go without being questioned. If you question these things, perhaps the crazy uncle will stop saying them. It'd be too much to ask people to remove racism from people's minds and their spirit and their bodies. But actually, African Americans just would be glad if they didn't publicly state it and publicly treat us like that. As I said, in the words of the great civil rights leader, the distinguished John Lewis, who's also a friend of Dr. Martin Luther King, says, when you see something that isn't right, not fair, not just, you speak up. You say something, you do something. We have to all say something and do something. And I think this council can do is by coming out in a strong and worded way in support of Black Lives Matter and all other groups that further racial justice. And I ask the citizens of this city to continue to make those of us welcome here who don't look like you, but we love Cannon Beach, we love the beauty of Cannon Beach, we love coming here. Because in the end, this is the United States of America, and we all have a right to be here because we all have the birthright of U.S. citizens. And I'm sorry I did not get the phone correct or get the connection correct, but thank you very much for putting up with me. I appreciate you giving me the time to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will have more of this discussion later, I'm sure. We're going to move on to our first item, which is.
Sam?
Yes?
Sam, this is Bruce. Colleen, did we do a vote on?
We never had a motion and a second on approving the minutes. We did make the correction, but we needed to do something to vote on the second minute.
So if somebody would make a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I move to approve the minutes of the June 2nd, 9th, and 23rd special meeting of the Tourism and Arts Commission with the noted correction.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Okay. That cover all the housekeeping there?
Yes, sir.
First item then is ordinance 2017. Bruce?
Actually, Public Works Director Karen Labonte will handle that.
Okay,
Sam, before I present, Ashley reminded me it was important that we allow public comments for this particular agenda item. If you want to do that before I present, this would be a good time to offer that.
Why don't we do it after you present, but before they vote? So everybody hears what the presentation is.
Okay.
Is that acceptable, Ashley?
Definitely works for me. Thank you.
Okay, got these today.
All right, so the first item, which is the consideration of the ordinance 2017 at the March 10th council work session, and then again on the 23rd council meeting, draft ordinance language was presented to amend Muni Code 13.18, billing and collection of utility charges. The ordinance contains the details of how the bill is computed, but does not include the base usage rate. This is a two-step process. The first is adopting the ordinance, which will revise the current billing model. The second is to adopt a resolution which modifies the base water cubic feet allowance per ordinance. The base billing rate will remain the same. The ordinance will become effective September 1st, 2020. The August utility bill will include an insert informing all customers of the upcoming changes. Information about the new rate structure will also be made available on the city's website. And I will add that our local newspaper did one article, and they will follow up with another article following your vote. So if council wishes to adopt ordinance 2017 tonight, two motions are in order. The first must pass unanimously in order to proceed to the second motion.
Do we have a public discussion or?
Yeah, I believe that now would be the time for public discussion, but I just want to make one comment. Karen, if I remember, if it's not unanimous and we can't do the two readings, then the effective date would no longer be September 1st, it would be October 1st.
That's correct.
Okay? Make sense? I was just asking the chair of our Public Works Committee. Okay. All right, so if it doesn't pass, we, on the second reading, which would happen on another night, we would have to change to October 1st for the effective date. We need time to set it up. Now I think, Sam, it would be appropriate to take public comment.
okay. I suppose we request through the chat system if you want. Quite sure how to do that myself, but if there's anybody out there that would like to make a comment specific to this ordinance, you're welcome to. Not seeing,
One person in the audience. Sam, do you have somebody from the audience come out?
okay,
Hi, I'm Denise Wilson, I just moved in on Elliott Way, and, Express Pay, so long as we're talking about the utilities, I have not been able to log on, I've tried 4 different, ways to get on to pay my water bill, my utilities, and I cannot get on. I've called the city about it, and they said, well, you gotta call Express Pay. Well, I think it's the city's thing, they need to make sure that that works. And then, that aside, I love it here. It is wonderful, and I really enjoyed the diverse, multicultural tourists that we had come into town. They were all pleasant and nice and wonderful. I get out and walk every day. I think I met some people from Africa and India and helped them with pictures and whatever. Everybody's very pleasant, very nice. I love our street. I love our neighbors. And I think that it's sad that some of the businesses have closed because of the lack of tourism. And the beach is big enough that there can be 10 times social distancing on there, and nobody is going to get anything from it. You know, like masks are a whole different subject, but and as far as fireworks, I would hate to be a police officer right now. I would hate it. And if somebody is not causing trouble, if they're not harming anybody, fine. You know, it's a little noise. My grandson didn't like it, but it's okay. So thank you for your service. I mean, it has to be so hard for you. Do you walk up to somebody or not? You know, so anyway, that's it. I would like you to make your utilities so I can pay my bill or get my bill, and pay online. And then just in general, I love Cannon Beach. I love being here. Everybody I've met is just wonderful, nice. And hey, tourism, they keep the businesses going. So, I don't know, that's all I have to say, and probably expect too much.
No. I'm gonna go grab a business card while y'all have your discussion, and then call me tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
okay, I see a hand raised for Kathy. Did you want to speak? Need somebody to unmute her. There we go.
Hi. I just want to address equity in this plan, as it doesn't appear that those that are living month to month are being addressed, in requiring a deposit of the size that you are asking does not address people that live month to month on bills, and being able to have water service while living month to month, requiring an initial deposit that is as outlined as I'm understanding it, does not appear equitable to those that may not be living with a cushion. So I would like to make sure that the council discusses that in this consideration.
Thanks, Kathy. Betsy, you showed a flag. Did you want to try and say something? Betsy Ayers?
Okay,
There we
no, thanks. Thank you. It's just that when I've been in other Zoom meetings, Sam, I see on the screen a way to contact the person that's running the meeting with a question or a comment, and I don't see that on this screen. All I see is a way for me to just, do a thumbs up or a hands up, which is okay. And then I just want to say I didn't really find out that the issue about fireworks was going to be on the agenda tonight until about 2:30 this afternoon, which according to the city's website makes me 2.5 hours too late to be able to speak to that issue when it comes up on the agenda. So I don't know how you want to handle that, but I just wanted to mention that. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll see when we
Okay.
get to that item. And just for my information, I found that if I go to the participants button down at the bottom and click that, you have the ability to raise your hand with a little blue hand.
Right.
So that's how I found Kathy.
Okay. Thank
So-
you.
Sam, can I address Betsy's issue regarding the timing on that item?
Okay,
You're absolutely, yes, you're absolutely correct, Betsy. It was, didn't go out till almost noon. And so, my recommendation to council is that, anybody that does want to speak not be held to the noon deadline.
okay then. I'm not seeing anybody else, so let's move on. Our last call. Okay. So, any last comments from staff, and then we'll move to consider the topic.
Not for me, Sam, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, if it's appropriate now. Kathy mentioned the deposit. Is this, could you describe what is required? And then it does say something in the ordinance that you can prorate that deposit if you've shown that you have paid, you have a good history of payment. Can you describe a little bit more about what that is all about? The deposit requirement?
I can't, I'm sorry, I wish I had somebody from finance here to kind of help me out with that. I'm not sure how they go through the steps of making some arrangements to that. Carolyn, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm wondering if she's, looking at the connection charges here, which is, I think, different than the deposit for service.
Yeah,
I was going through here trying to figure out where the deposit for
I'm
service
kind of
is.
thrown off guard with the deposit because I think that's a misinterpretation. There's a confusion of that.
Looking at it right now, it's under 1318-020 in application for service.
Right.
So anybody that already has an existing account won't be asked for a deposit.
Correct.
So this is only for new service. And then under C, the city manager may waive the deposit, as Nancy said, if the utility user demonstrates satisfactory pay records. Then below it, it also says the city manager may waive the deposit requirement of applicants upon receipt of a signed automatic payment agreement.
And I believe that that is for a person getting service for the very first time.
Sure.
Brand new customer. So I think what we're voting on tonight doesn't change that. That's part of our existing ordinance, and it would not change under this particular ordinance and resolution that we're putting in place.
And this is for residents as well as commercial?
I'm sorry,
This is for residents as well as commercial?
all customers, yes.
Any other questions, comments?
I wanted to
Robin had a question.
comment.
Sam.
Yeah, please. So many things have been happening quickly in our town, opening up outdoor seating, closing hemlocks, 14-day rentals, 4th of July, wearing masks. With all of these events on our community's mind, many have probably not been aware of the water rate increase and how much it might mean to running their households. As a city council, we must make a best effort to make our citizens aware of this increase. I'd like to propose that on the next bill, there also be a note of what the actual bill is and what the increase would be. Is that possible?
For the July bill, or we have it proposed for August right now. I have to check with Lori to see what our cutoff is for the July bill, but we could certainly,
Whichever one it falls on. So if
Okay.
it's too late for this one, for the next one,
definitely already planned for August.
to have both.
Right.
for people to look at.
They'll see the table of what it is today versus what it would be under this new,
That, I really appreciate that, thank you.
and can I just clarify something? Our base rate is not changing. So when we talk about, the change in the rate, it is the water allocation, if you will, not our base rate service is not changing.
But that would be a bill that people would receive where they might have gone over that base rate, and they can see the difference between
Definitely.
what they're being billed for that month and what it will be in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but won't most people see a decrease? There will be some people with larger
majority of
meters?
our customers will see a decrease, we'll see the same bill. I'm sorry, will not see an increase,
Okay.
but our larger meter customers will be the ones that are impacted.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, anybody else? Then we're looking for a motion. We have a cheat sheet on this one.
This is Mike. I'll make a motion. I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 20-17.
Second?
Seconded. Ordinance 20-17 for the purpose of amending the municipal code, chapter 1318, billing and collections of utility charges. Any further discussion? Amendments, whatever? Not hearing any, I'll call the roll.
Council President Benefield,
Yes.
Councilor Risley,
Yes.
Councilor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy,
Yes.
Mayor Stidle,
Yes. Okay, that was unanimous, so we can approve the second reading by a second motion.
I move to approve the second reading and adopt ordinance number 20-17.
Second?
Ordinance 20-17 for the purpose of amending the municipal code, chapter 1318, billing and collections of utility charges. Any discussion on this? Colleen, call the roll.
Councilor Risley,
Yes.
Councilor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy, Council President Benefield,
Yes.
Mayor Stidle,
Yes. Ordinance number
Thank you.
20-17 has been adopted and will become effective September 1st, correct? Okay, now I have to find my agenda. Next item, 20-25 for repealing something. Is this Karen still?
Yes. So this is the second step to our process. This is consideration of resolution 20-25. And again, on March 10th, council work session and the 23rd council meeting, the draft language was presented to you to modify municipal code 13.18, billing and collection of utility charges. This resolution contains the details on the base and water usage rate amounts, which is not included in the ordinance. This is the second step of a two-step process. The resolution modifies the base water cubic feet allowance per the ordinance. The base billing rate will remain the same. This resolution is effective September 1st. I do want to bring to council's attention that on page 1 of Exhibit A, we have a typo. If you'll go to that page and look at the irrigation line, the amount shows 4585. The amount should actually be 4840, and we will make that correction. As stated with the ordinance, the August utility bill will include an insert informing all customers of the upcoming upcoming changes. Information about the new rate structure will also be made available to the city's website. And again, we will have something in the newspaper and on the newspaper's online edition. Recommendation would be to adopt Resolution 20-25 for the purpose of repealing Resolution 20-24.
I make a motion to adopt Resolution 20-25 for the purpose of repealing Resolution 20-24 and make the correction noted by the Public Works Director.
Second?
Seconded. Any discussion about this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think, this is Bruce, I think that we need to take public comment again before you vote.
Okay, we can hold the vote for a minute and take the comment. We can ask for comment. I'm not seeing anybody stepping up. Anybody in the audience?
Nobody here in the room.
Okay,
Nobody in the audience here seems to be ready.
okay then. The, pardon?
Call for the vote.
All for the vote, thank you.
Councilor Ogilvie?
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy?
Yes.
Council President Benefield?
Yes.
Councilor Risley?
Yes.
Mayor Stidle?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. 20-25 is passed. Somebody out there?
And I'd just like to thank Carolyn Probst and the Public Works Committee for taking on this charter. Carolyn led the effort, and it took a long time to get to where we are tonight. I'd just like to publicly thank her.
I can't remember ever hearing applause in this room. It took a rate increase to do it. Thank you.
Okay, our next item is consideration for Breakers Point Conditional Use Appeal. I know Bill is on the line, but Bruce, do you want to get us started?
No, I was just gonna turn it over to Bill. Bill's our land use attorney.
Vote?
What was the question?
We didn't vote on that yet.
Well, does he have to read anything? Does he have to second?
Nope, that was a
Are we
resolution.
done?
So this is not a public hearing item. This, under your code, is a non-public hearing item, so there shouldn't be a need to read the introductory material. So if that, I'll just launch into staff report if that works.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Okay, Mayor Stidle, Commissioner, Councilors. The Breakers Point Homeowners Association filed a conditional use application to install a sheet piling on its property, essentially where North Laurel Street dead ends into Ecola Creek in that area. Planning Commission denied that application, and the Breakers Point Homeowners Association has filed an appeal. The hearing on this matter will be held in August. This is a preliminary step under the council code to determine what the scope of that hearing will be. There are a few options. One of the options is a limited to the record developed before the Planning Commission. So no new evidence would come in, no new issues. The council would just have arguments on the evidence that's already in the record. Another alternative is to allow some new evidence on limited issues, but not on everything. And the third is a de novo hearing, which essentially is a hearing as new that would allow all new evidence to come in from any participant. The applicant has requested a de novo hearing, which would allow any new evidence, any new arguments, anybody to participate. However, your code sets up a default that is different. And so I'm going to take a quick step through the code. And this is attached to the end of the memo that you got this afternoon. And 17.88160 says an appeal of a planning commission decision, the reviewing body may determine it as a non-public hearing item, the scope of review on appeal. And so that's what we're doing tonight. You know, the substance, the big hearing will happen in August, but you're just determining the scope of appeal, whether it'll be restricted to the record, limited to additional evidence on such issues as you determine necessary, potentially remand the matter to the planning commission, but given the timeline, that's not really an option, or for a de novo hearing on the record, on the merits. Then you go to 1788-170, and it says, unless otherwise provided for by the reviewing body, that's you, the city council, review of the decision on appeal shall be confined to the record of the proceeding as specified in this section. And it lays out what's in the record, the planning commission decision, the minutes, the testimony, all the rest. So the default position is it's on the record. Yes.
Can you slow down a little bit for those of us that aren't legal scholars?
I apologize. I will.
You got a lot to say, and it's a little hard to follow. So, just if you would slow down, please. Thank you.
Will do. I apologize. So, essentially, you have the three options: de novo, limited to certain issues, or an entirely new hearing. Your code says default is limited to the record and just argument. However, 1788-180 says the reviewing body shall grant a request for a new hearing only when it finds that. So essentially it says grant a new hearing only when you can find one of these things is met. First, the additional testimony or other evidence could not reasonably have been presented at the prior hearing. So if the Breakers Point Homeowners Association has explained to you that, yeah, we really couldn't make this argument, we couldn't introduce this evidence at that prior hearing, then you should grant a de novo hearing. If not, it's on the record. Or, and this is the second part, you've got one, you know, could not reasonably have been presented, or, and the second part is a two-part test. A hearing is necessary to fully and properly evaluate a significant issue. And three, the request for de novo is not necessitated by an improper or unreasonable conduct of the appellant or by a failure to present evidence as available at the time of the previous review. So you've got a significant issue and there wasn't any improper or unreasonable conduct and there wasn't a failure to present evidence that was available at the time of the previous review. So again, three options: de novo, limited to certain issues, or confined to the record. The default position is confined to the record, but you can order a de novo hearing if the evidence and testimony could not have been presented at the, could not reasonably have been presented at the Planning Commission, or the hearing is necessary to fully and properly evaluate a significant issue, and the request is not the result of improper reasonable conduct or by failure to present evidence that was available. So does that make sense as what you're looking at? And if it does, I can go forward into what Breakers Point is.
I have a question, Bill, just kind of a process thing. If we were to go with the first choice, which is no new evidence, and then in the process, we feel like there is a hole and new evidence should be available, can we amend that and change it at some point?
Yes, I believe you can. The one difficulty with changing that would be if you change that midstream, you would have to provide notice to everybody, because prior to that, the notice would have gone out and said, it's going to be on the record. And so nobody can submit anything. And if we said, oh no, now we're going to allow new evidence in, everybody would have to have the opportunity to submit that new evidence. And the only concern with that would be that there may be some timing issue to have notice in the hearing and then also a new notice that we've changed.
Is there a time limit to this process?
So the city has to make its final decision, including all appeals, within 120 days of the application being complete. The applicant has granted an extension, and I believe it's now currently the city's decision is due sometime in mid-August. I would have to talk to Jeff about exactly when that is, but I think there's enough time for a hearing in August and bring the decision back to you. But if you were to want to change your mind to allow new evidence, it may well be that the applicant would be willing to extend that deadline. It's entirely within their control. We can't force them to, but they could choose to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other council questions before we ask Bill to move on? Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so in their notice of appeal, Breakers Point provides an explanation for why it's asking it to grant a de novo hearing. First, they say that the Planning Commission decision interpreted several provisions of the criteria and applied those interpretation in its decision. Those interpretations were not previously available to the applicant, and a de novo hearing would allow the applicant to address why the interpretations lead to the incorrect conclusions in this decision. City Council is in the best position to interpret the zoning code and should do so after considering all points of view. So the initial response to that is, well, if in fact there were new interpretations, perhaps it makes sense to allow a de novo hearing, because if they didn't know this was where the Planning Commission was going to go, they couldn't reasonably have presented it. However, if it's just about interpretations, that's argument. And in a limited record, you still hear that argument. How should we interpret this particular criteria? Should it mean X or should it mean Y? But the evidence doesn't change. It's just about how to interpret it. So there's also the flip side that, the limited hearing that allows argument gives them everything that they need to challenge those new interpretations. The second thing that Breakers Point says is the Planning Commission faulted the applicant for not providing several items that had not previously been requested by the city, nor characterized as omissions in the staff report. The applicant first learned about these issues in the Planning Commission decision, and the City Council should afford the applicant the opportunity to address them in the first instance. For example, the decision criticized the application for proposing a structural solution before there was, quote, evidence presented that the foundation soils of the existing structure are weak and, quote, will be eliminated or reduced to the extent necessary for avoiding hazardous decisions. Yet the decision found that if substantial erosion did occur to the point where the sheet piling became exposed, there's concern of the effects on fish habitat. In some, the decision contradicted itself about the need for the sheet piling and the likelihood of future erosion. A de novo hearing is needed to demonstrate why the proposed sheet piling is not premature and will not interfere with the estuary and to aid the City Council in resolving the contradictions. So, they suggest this is just one example, but they don't provide any other one. So it's hard to interpret any except for what they provided to us. And in it, they say, the Planning Commission never told us that we had to show evidence that foundation soils were weak, and never told us that there was evidence that the soil will be eliminated or reduced to the extent necessary for avoiding hazardous situations. But if you look at the criteria for the application they've submitted, you've got to show demand exists for the use at the proposed location. And so evidence that there's a need is part of the demand for the use. And as far as whether the foundation soils are weak, and no evidence the soil be eliminated or reduced, another one requires, another of the criterion says potential problems due to weak foundation soils will be eliminated or reduced to the extent necessary for avoiding hazardous situations. So what they're saying that the city never told them they needed are laid out right in the criteria that they were supposed to apply. So the question for the council is, are you satisfied that Breakers Point has made the case that, and I'm going to go back up here, that the additional testimony or evidence could not reasonably have been presented at the prior hearing, or that the hearing is necessary to fully and properly evaluate a significant issue relevant to the proposed development action, and the request is not necessitated by improper or reasonable conduct of the appellant or by a failure to present evidence that was available at the time of the previous review. So there's not a great match between, oh, go ahead.
I have a question, Bill, do we have, if we wanted to go ahead with a de novo hearing, would we have to find all 3 of these conditions, or can we pick 1, 2, or 3?
I'm going to say option C. It's either 1 or 2 and 3. If you look at the way the section is set up, you've got 1, if it finds 1 additional testimony, or 2 and 3.
Okay.
So there are 2 routes to get there. One would be just 1, and the other one would be 2 and 3.
All right. Okay, thank you.
So I was just going to finish up and say there's not a great match between the arguments that the Breakers Point has given to you and the code that you've got to apply, and that kind of puts you in a tough spot because you've got to sort of make the leap to one or the other. And I think either one of them is defensible, to either have it on the limited to the record or to allow a de novo hearing. A few things to think about. One is your default says limited to the record. A second thing is that there is, if this is a significant issue and has some impacts on public safety, if they're saying they need to protect a building, that seems like a significant issue. And would it be a better course, even if you might not otherwise, to allow additional evidence to make sure that's properly evaluated? And the final thing that I would point out to you is that should this decision be denied, there is a provision in your code that would prevent Breakers Point from applying for a similar application for 6 months afterwards. So they couldn't just refile tomorrow or the day after the decision is made. They'd have to wait 6 months before they could file for it. So with that, I'm available for questions. Like I said, it's not a straightforward answer, but what I can tell you is that wherever you end up is likely defensible and can be the right thing, and so make the decision that you think is in the best interest of the city.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions for Bill or any preferences by the council?
Well, I'd state a preference, and that is to limit the hearing to the record before the Planning Commission and allow argument but no new evidence. As I went through not only the application, but the recording of the Planning Commission meetings and the findings of the Community Development Director, I was not swayed that there was a need for additional data or additional testimony to address the appeal. So I guess my recommendation would be hearing to be limited only to the record, and when you talk about they could apply again in 6 months, I would hope that rather than applying again and trying to get clever with the words and address whatever perceived deficiencies were there, I'd rather see them meet with all the stakeholders that are involved and have an interest in preserving the Ecola Creek shoreline. And rather than trying to avoid meeting with DSL or Corps of Engineers, I'd rather see them work hand in hand with them and various nonprofits that have a strong interest in this and the city, and come up with a a solution or proposal that would, benefit everyone, not the least of which would be the salmon and the creek, rather than just saying, well, we're not gonna address any potential erosion, we're just gonna build a bulwark that if it ever happened, we protected the foundation. That's a very defensive approach. I'd rather see a proactive approach, getting together with the stakeholders and coming together, make a proposal to the city to address this as a long-term issue.
Anybody else? I can't see you, so.
You should be with us.
This is Robin. I do agree with Mike in that I feel that, they do have the stakeholders to work with to come up with a better solution. And I would like to, support our planning commission and the thoughts that I heard all of the testimony, and I also thought Jeff Adams did a good job of summing it up. And I also agree that I would like to select number 1.
Will we be voting on this evening, or
No.
are we just looking for consensus among the council?
Bill, are we looking for votes?
Yes, you make a decision this evening as to the scope of review, and then that's communicated to the parties so that they can prepare for the hearing appropriately.
So we need an appropriate.
That's kind of where I was getting at.
Brandon?
I'm just wondering what a motion might look like.
I think a motion that the review will be limited, will be confined to the record of the proceeding as before the planning commission.
Thank you, Bill.
Somebody want to make a motion?
You gonna make that motion, Brandon?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to pick option 1, that be restricted to the record made on the decision being appealed.
That was your motion, right?
Yes.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion on it? Colleen?
Councilor McCarthy?
Yes.
Council President Benefield?
Yes.
Councilor Risley?
Yes.
Councilor Ogilvie?
Yes.
Mayor Stidle?
Yes. Okay, Bill, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my agenda just shifted, so hang on. Our next item is the chief's report on fireworks. Jason?
I'm out of here. As you know, 2020's been a funky year, and why would we expect anything different on the 4th of July? It was, as you can see by the statistics, it was, I think, the worst year since I've been here, related to fireworks calls. And I apologize that you guys get the brunt of a lot of that, because we do have rules in place. Our municipal code for fireworks is, I think, adequate. I haven't seen anything that argues that it's not, and I also think that we have our state law, which makes it a misdemeanor for having possession of illegal fireworks or setting them off or even selling them. And we have a zero tolerance policy here, just like Seaside does on fireworks. As you can see, I highlighted on the stats that our 2 busiest years were Saturdays. And I think that with this weekend and the fact that
fireworks displays weren't happening in many cities, including Seaside. People decided to come down here where it's normally quieter and or not crowded. We did have everybody on that day, and they all worked very, very hard. In fact, we put Val and Laura on different shifts during the day. Laura worked till 6 p.m. and Valerie was supposed to work 6 to midnight. Well, Valerie ended up working 6 till 5 a.m. because she was so slammed on answering the radio. We're not able to get into the radio for Seaside unless it's an emergency, just because their radio's tied up. Officers up there and things they're dealing with. And so having Laura and Val here is much easier for all our officers to be able to get out. And we also had, and this was new, we used to do this with Matt Gardner from the fire department when he was there, but they had 2 fire officers down on the beach patrolling as well and talking with people and educating people. And that was an all-day thing. I was down there all day and had seen both of them. You know, we kept passing each other, and I'm sure if you had gone down to the beach, you saw how crowded it was, and it just turned much worse once the nighttime hit. And so I know that my officers were down there patrolling throughout the night. The struggle was getting around the people to respond to the calls. There's lots of holes on the beach that were dug out for fires, and I know that one of the vehicles almost got stuck trying to respond to a call. And so we did have officers that were walking down once we get the calls. As you can imagine, and you guys are all welcome to do a sit-along or ride-along on the 4th of July, but they're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, responding to the calls. And by the time they arrive to a call, if they get there on time, the people are scattering up into the dunes, and we go and seize the fireworks that are left over. The officers did seize over 200 fireworks over the weekend. Most of those were on the 4th of July, and they would respond down when we got a complaint, and by the time we got there, the people would be gone, and there would be people that would call in saying they ran back down to the beach after you guys left, and either they'd be responding to a priority call. We did have a stolen vehicle that night, as well as disturbances that are priority calls over fireworks. So they just stayed busy. I think being on a Saturday was one of the issues that we saw. It was just a perfect storm of everything happening. The weather ended up turning nice that day. Like I had talked about, other displays weren't going on, but it's certainly something that we can always learn to improve. And I know this isn't something that the council is responsible for. You know, this is something that we'll work on with enforcement. And we've already talked about some ideas for the future, whether it's signage or working with different agencies to help protect the rock, that type of thing. Every department is stressed on the force, so it's not like we'll get other agencies to be able to come down and help us because they're all dealing with their own nuisances in the city, but certainly a perfect storm this year. The good thing was there were no injuries. We did have one citation that is issued, and that was one where Christian had waited in the area after they kept getting numerous complaints in the area. He finally said, I'm just going to wait here. And the other officers cleared. Well, he saw a subject walk back over and set off 8 of them, and he walked right down and seized the rest of the fireworks and issued a citation. But really, unless we're catching them in hand, it's hard to find out because people deny it left and right.
It's also dark.
Huh?
It's also dark, so it's hard to miss.
But we did see a blue on blue shirt down there.
Tall guy.
Any questions for me regarding anything?
Were there any fire calls?
There were. There was a subject that had rolled his ankle on the beach, probably running from us. And they did respond down there later in the evening. Luckily, there were no water rescue calls on the 4th. There were some people that they contacted, but along with Seaside, the water's been so warm this year that that's been a big priority as well. trying to educate in the water.
State Parks did loan us numerous signs. In fact, they put them up for us that were large fluorescent signs that they use that say fireworks prohibited. And they put them on the major beach access points. You guys probably saw some of those. But to most people's disregard, you know. But they were there.
Someone suggested to me that perhaps we should have signs in short-term rentals saying no fireworks allowed, and maybe year-round even, because we hear them all the time, but
Yeah.
especially around the 4th.
Yeah, no, and it's certainly something we could work with the chamber on, and hotels, as well as vacation rentals, just putting out notice as well, and having them put on the signs about the fireworks. And we have a big flyer that's a reasoning on why we don't allow them on the beach, and it helps make sense to people, but also animals as well, in general.
Okay.
I know one of the beachfront hotels is adamant with all of their guests that there would be no fireworks on the beach, and reminded them when they checked in, when they made reservations, when they checked in, and as they were headed out to the beach. I never really on it. I'm hopeful some of the others were as well, but the vacation rentals, I have no idea whether that word's getting out to them, but certainly perhaps through the chamber next year, fireworks aren't allowed here.
I think we hear loud and clear what's going on, and I think that we'll probably be bringing you some proposals, a combination of things that we think will work at some point.
Hope you include
Unmute Betsy.
David Scott.
Excuse me, could we unmute Betsy? 'Cause she had a comment for this.
Thank you. Jason, I'm curious, is there a different set of laws for what people can set off in neighborhoods as opposed to what's illegal to set off on the Oregon shore, which is a state law? What, is it the same? Or, how does that work? Because, the beach was a nightmare, but so were the neighborhoods. And I just didn't know what the cities, are they different?
They are, everything's illegal on the beach. Legal fireworks and illegal fireworks. Sparklers are allowed, and smoke bombs are allowed on the beach, and some smaller things. But in general, everything's not allowed on the beach, just because of, for one, the trash that's left behind that goes into the ocean, but mostly for the animals that are on Haystack Rock and in the area there. In neighborhoods, you are allowed to have legal Oregon fireworks, and that's in the city ordinance and obviously state law as well.
Well, that's
Speaking of
something the city
attraction-
council could take a look at, in my opinion. It just seems like, in the years that I've lived here, there've been a lot of, I don't even know how to say this. It seemed like there was a huge effort years ago to make sure that Canna Beach was really clearly an environmentally conscious community, that we were worried about the sea life and the damage that the fireworks cause, and that this is not a party town, and that we're just going to be having a quiet community, and fireworks are not what's going to be happening here. And really more of a pro-education thing about the repercussions, not only, but mostly to the environment, but as, for people that live here, there are an awful lot of people that are pretty upset and angry about what happened over the 4th of July. And I'm just wondering, if that's the city's role or chamber's role, or if it's private citizens who need to be really somehow really encouraging more of an effort to say, this is what we stand for, and to get it out in the media well in advance, because thank you, I'm done. That it was awful.
Thanks, Betsy. I just want to comment a little bit. I agree. We had, I thought, been heading towards a much nicer 4th of July noise level in the past few years. It kind of shows up on our records. You go back to 2017 on Jason's stats here. There was only 2 recalls on those days. you know, the,
I think that that's a misnomer. We are looking into that.
yeah, but I just had the sense of it because it was easing down slowly and getting to where my dog actually doing okay. Luckily now she's getting very deaf, so that helped this year. But I think the snowball effect of all the other stuff going on really, and the fact it was on Saturday, and just you could tell there was a dramatic increase this year. I would like to have us look at, not right away, I'm sure this could be a really good winter conversation where we could sit down and try and figure out some means to stiffen the enforcement a little bit with what the city council can create, either an ordinance or just increase the fines or whatever it can help, have that discussion. I've done a little research. There are some other communities in the state that have outlawed it entirely. You know, we could go as dramatic as Vancouver because they outlawed it literally from one year to the next, you know, full on war zone to zero, which wasn't effective. The war zone still happened. It just happened in different places, but it did help them enforce it. And they're easing down pretty quickly. So I think that's a discussion that we should work on well before next year's onslaught. Thanks, David. Anybody else in the council have comments? If not, I will add some more. I really appreciate what Jason and his staff have been doing. They put on a lot of extra work on that evening. I could tell they were tired the next day, just by the way they drove by and didn't wave and all that kind of stuff. But it's nice that they're willing to work the extra hours and do what they do so well. Having been one of those folks that used to run into the woods when I lit off a firework when I was a kid, I understand how hard it is to be the police officer trying to catch somebody doing that. I would consider some brainstorming on maybe ideas that we could support the police in that effort with volunteers or support staff somehow. I don't know, that's part of the discussion. So I'm done.
Yeah, Deb, that was one of the people that contacted us.
Yeah.
I called in twice.
Yeah, Deb, why don't you come up here?
I had talked before it happened because I had this feeling that it was gonna happen. And so we live up on Sunset and we have a view, so we can see exactly what was going off. And so I called in and I'd go dispatch to it, and you guys, in many cases, beat me to it, which was great. So and you guys are great. They were on it and they did confiscate. One party was a wedding party, and that one. But the ones I was really, really concerned with were right in front of Haystack Rock. And my motivation is wildlife, and animals and birds and preservation. And I would opt for no fireworks at all. So, and I can help come up with a lot of ideas, and I will research for you other paid places. I will volunteer for free to research for you all these other places and propose them for you. Is the cost $10,000 if they're cost? I think the police action on that has to be increased. You guys can't run. I mean, I was running around. And I got in a confrontation with somebody who was drunk, and I'm kind of feisty, so luckily somebody came along and just went, peace, and I went, okay. But it was kind of like they didn't care, and they didn't care about the puppets, and they didn't care, you know. they were right downtown and on Hemlock, I couldn't even drive through the street. And they were all drunk and belligerent. So I don't know, I look to life as being more adults and be more responsible and supporting the police. I'm a big supporter of the police. I need you.
Thank you.
I absolutely need the police, so, and I need my husband, you know, we need each other. So I would like to see, you know, a stricter approach, fines, and if you don't have enough staff on, we raise the bar and get the staff. Or you train people, I'll go out, you just can't give me a gun. You know, I'll go out and help you. And even if I call, okay, over here, you know, whatever, I will volunteer because this place means that much to me. So, and I will research all these communities because I see this place as really sacred. And I really want to keep it that way. And I will devote my life to it because I love it here so much. So that's why I landed here. So, whatever I can do to support all of you, 100%, I'm here. So.
Thank you.
I think I know who that was, but I need a name and address.
Oh, you do? I never do that. My name's Debatia, and I live up on Sunset Boulevard, 384 South Sunset. We moved here 2 years ago, so we've come here all our lives, and been very active in the community. I'm also very connected to the media, and have connections there. So I can, you know, connect with them to tell them before all of this to say, okay, guys, no fireworks in Cannon Beach, and they will do it. So I also have a lot of social media connections, so that word can go out. I think we have to utilize that now too. And there's, you know, 22 some members on I Love Cannon Beach. You know, I have a whole bunch of friends. Everybody can coordinate that together and get the word out. And I don't think that people want to not have this place. I would raise the whole town to another level, and all of that would bring in so much more income. And I mean, I know how to do it because I ran my own business and was successful with it. But I think I just have a vision, and I'll do a proposal, and you guys can take it what you feel is right. So.
Thank you.
That'd be great. And by the animal, or do we have a city animal as the puffin? Okay, it's gotta be puff.
Red-winged blackbird.
Our totem animal.
Okay, council have any other comments? Okay, let's move on to our monthly status report and communications.
This is Robin.
Robin?
On the short-term rentals, and if you look down at the numbers, 2042, it should be 204. I think.
It seems like 2040.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna talk to you about that, Jeff.
Things have changed.
Okay, I'm not hearing much else. I'll add just a little bit. I've had a little bit of communications with some of the regional mayors, our local mayors. I talked to Manzanita and Warrenton recently. I was also on one of these Zoom things with about 60 of the state mayors, just kibitzing. They weren't really getting anything done. So that was interesting. Nice to meet them again, but not a lot of help. What I have learned is that a lot of the city council meetings are doing distancing and doing their meetings on Zoom or other media type situations because of the new science that's coming about the small particulate, things like that. Other than that, I have nothing else. So, anybody? If not, I'm going to adjourn.
No, I got something. I'd just like to revisit our, motion that we had on the table for resolution 2025. We had a motion and a second, but as Mike pointed out, we didn't ever vote.
Yeah, we did. Colleen,
Yeah, Colleen's looking it up right now.
I called the roll on it.
Yes, so at some point, I had that, 2025, Bedfield was the motion, and OV was the second, and then I called the names, and I marked.
Okay, I'm
marked
sorry,
as you
I'm
answered.
glad to be wrong.
Sam, this is giving me a scare.
Yeah.
Sam, this is Bruce. I have 2 items to go to the order.
Okay,
First one is that, the farmer's market, board is meeting tomorrow. I'll be participating in that meeting. It is to, reconsider having the farmer's market this year with some of the things that are happening, as far as the, increases in numbers and things. And Oregon is not seeing it that much, but other places have. And it's kind of, is the potential, risk worth, a 2-month farmer's market? So, that'll be discussed. And I guess my question is, are you okay going with the decision of the board? Or do you want us to bring that back to council, whatever their decision is?
I'm okay with
Board,
The board? Okay, good. All right, the other thing, and you're not gonna believe this coming from me, but we really don't have anything for the workshop next Tuesday. And, I won't cry if it, gets canceled. But we really don't have anything.
how did that happen?
I don't know, I'm just gonna go ahead and check with staff, what have you been doing? No, I think what's happened is that we've been so focused over here, that some of the things that normally would flow through, we haven't, done. And so we kind of cleaned things up. And so, that's,
Well, there were several things brought up today that could be addressed. Start thinking now about next year's 4th of July while it's really fresh on our minds. The other is, several of the speakers brought up what's going on socially right now with, systemic racism. Is that something we need to be thinking about, not only think about, but are there actions should be taken there? Maybe a review of internal policies and by internal, I mean even our own personal internal processes. I don't know if there's anything we can address as far as it goes with the outflows. I think that was all kind of put on hold, but it's
with the outflow.
the beach outflow, like 7th Street, 7th.
There's no funding for those.
Okay, so.
Except I think in this year's budget, we did keep the 7th Street.
We kept 7th Street.
But not the presidential.
Okay, so nothing really, it's in the budget, we,
7th is in the budget.
yep, okay. There's just a couple of things that,
Mike, we can put those, again.
I mean, I'm not just wanting a meeting, and those are pretty, those won't be lengthy discussion, and they could be rolled to the next work session, but I think we ought to make sure that they do get on the next work session, whether it's next Tuesday or a month from next Tuesday.
Okay, it's y'all's call, we're good either way.
I think the 4th of July, while it's fresh in our minds, is really important. And also I agree with our issue of racism. I think I've heard enough, interest about, that I'd like to get more educated. So those would be the 2.
Sure. So those 2 items?
Yeah.
That work for everybody?
All right.
All right.
okay.
I think that the staff reports will be pretty thin, because we'll just be starting the discussion.
Right.
Okay.
And I think that would actually be more agreeable to those 2 topics, that we didn't have a whole bunch of other topics weighing in on behind them. So kept it a nice, comfortable evening and talked about those 2 things and any one other maybe that popped up. I'm good with that.
Okay.
Okay, then? Anybody else ready to order? I don't have my gavel, but bang, bang, we are adjourned.
I really love bang bang.
Yeah.